My testimony would be similar, maybe sounding to many other people, in that I was brought up in a Christian household. My parents are both Christians, and we were always brought up from an early age, as long as I can remember, going to Sunday school, going to church every week. We always went to church, and that was always part of my life for as long as I can remember. However, I felt growing up it was just something that we did. Personally, I didn't feel much connection to going to church, and I certainly wouldn't have said at any stage of my childhood that I felt I had a relationship with God. In many ways, I felt that our lifestyle was the same as everybody else's. It was just that we had to go to church on a Sunday, and we said grace before we had our tea at night. And in many other ways, church felt very unrelated to the rest of our lives and to the rest of my life. And I felt, as I grew up as a teenager, I guess I felt less and less connection to the church and its relevance to my own life, and I guess the overall significance that I felt it had for me. I wouldn't have ever said that I didn't believe that God existed. I think I always felt He existed, but I just couldn't see beyond the religious nature of going to church, and I didn't really see that there was anything else beyond that. So when I got to the age of 18 and I left home and went to university, I kind of dabbled in church, I suppose. I didn't go weekly, I just maybe went occasionally, and I would always go when I was at home again, maybe at Christmas or at the Easter holidays in the summer, that type of thing. But again, it was more just out of duty or out of habit, I suppose.
Hey, well, my story of faith is similar to Mary's in that I also grew up in a Christian household with Christian parents and Christian siblings, and also had that experience of growing up surrounded by the things of God in a really healthy way. It's different to Mary's situation in that I didn't relate going to church or the things of God at that early age with routine or legalism at all. It was a life-giving, very privileged upbringing with amazing parents and other family members, so it was all very positive. And so my kind of initial starting point would be to say that although that's true, I didn't automatically become a Christian because I was surrounded in that positive environment. So my mum and dad were Christians, my other brothers and a sister who also knew God in that very personal way. That didn't automatically make me a Christian. And it wasn't until I was probably, well, I was still really young, I must have been under 10, I can't actually remember the exact age because I was so young, but I was in a Sunday school setting with my then Sunday school teacher called Tina Campbell Black, an amazing lady, faithful Sunday school leader and teacher. And there was a group of young kids, and there was a story about the life of Joseph as a focus of that particular Sunday morning. And I remember the opportunity that was then given to respond in that personal way to the gospel. Even though I'd grown up in this Christian family, even though my parents were Christians and my other brothers and sisters were, but I had to then come to a place. So I was given this personal opportunity on the back of this story about the life of Joseph to do that, to respond personally for myself as a then young kid. And I remember the excitement of appropriating, even in that young age, what it meant to become a Christian, and sensing at that time what we would call the presence of God, the awareness of the presence of the Holy Spirit in that moment. And I did. I responded in faith in a very childlike way. I was a kid. I came to Him and said, Jesus, I want to know You personally. I want to respond to this, even as a kid, an awareness of needing to be forgiven for my sinfulness as a kid, as a person, as a human being.
So So in 2008 I finished my degree and really had no idea what I wanted to do, so decided to move back to France to work as an English teaching assistant in a school. And it was at that period in my life that I felt that God really spoke to me for the first time in a very personal and very striking way. And I'd moved out to France and I'd started this new job that I'd never done before. I was living with new people, I was speaking a foreign language, I was doing all these different and new things, and yet every single morning that I lived there I was waking up thinking about heaven and hell. And this happened for about 2 months straight. That's all I woke up thinking about, and it was so striking that I didn't know what else to do other than to find a church to go to. And it was the first time where I felt I was going to church because I had to find something out for myself rather than just going because it was a sense of duty or because that's just what you did on a Sunday. So it was in France, in Nice, International Baptist Church that I found, and just started going along to it. And despite having spent 4 years studying the Bible at university, for the first time I felt the Bible was opened up to me in a way that I had never heard it before, and in a way that I had to respond to. I had to, at the end of my time there, I knew that I had to make a decision because it was so profound, it was so life-changing that I had to respond to Jesus. There was nothing else that I could do, and I could no longer try and escape it or deny it or anything else. I had to accept Jesus for who he was and is, and that was the time where I gave my life to Jesus, and I knew that it was the most significant decision that I had ever made.
I went to university when I was 19 in London, so I moved from Devon to London, and during those three years it became quite apparent that God was really getting his fingers into the nitty-gritty, as it were, of my life. He got my attention in those years through my mind. I became very anxious at university, and I think today there'd be quite a lot of focus on the mental health of people in society generally, and particularly university students who have immense pressures, being away from at home in this intense growth phase. And that's no less true for young Christians, for young believers, and in some ways perhaps more so. And so I'd gone through these years at university really knowing the fire of God's sanctification in my life, through areas of compromise, and God willing, I wasn't involved in anything majorly bad. I didn't become addicted to drugs, I didn't sleep around, I didn't whatever, but there was still that sense of God getting my attention through the area of my mind and through what became quite an anxious period of my life. I left university in 2002, and it was shortly after that I went to leadership college, and I went and did 2 years training with the church in the north of England, a great church called Life Church. And that was a period of my life again, and I'm just trying to give you bullet points as I go along. I'm 38 now, so I was saved when I was under 10, went to university when I was 19, went to leadership training when I was 23, came out of that, and throughout all the years I've known Jesus become an increasing focus of my life, in the sense of wanting to live for nothing else. There's nothing else that I want to live for. There's nothing else that I can live for.
Waking up every single morning in France thinking about heaven and hell was quite a disturbing time for me. But it showed me, I think for the very first time, that God really does intervene in our personal lives and wants to have an intimate relationship with each of us. It's more than just duty. And that, coupled with going to a church where I really felt the Bible was interpreted and taught in a way that I had never experienced before, brought me to a real deep understanding of who Jesus actually was.
Jesus for me is everything. Jesus was who he said he was. He was the Son of God. He was the only way to the Father. He's the only way to know peace with God. He's not one option among many. He is the only way. And that's the thing that confuses me sometimes about what people actually think about Jesus. Why did he end up dying? Jesus didn't end up dying on a Roman cross because he claimed to be one option amongst many. It was precisely because he claimed to be the only way that everybody thought he was a blasphemer, a madman, a demon-possessed, raving lunatic. And actually, I've come to find him to be authentically, irresistibly, sometimes frustratingly and frighteningly the only option for peace. Jesus is the only way to the Father who made us. We're made in the image of God. And so here I am now 38, Mairi's 33, and there is nothing we would rather live for. We want to proclaim his worth, we want to proclaim his truth, we want to understand his word, we want to see people mature in discipleship, we want to see the church characterized by genuine radical lifestyles of fasting and prayer. We want to prepare the way for Jesus to return. At the core of the gospel is that Jesus didn't just live and die and rise again from a tomb, but that he's coming again. Jesus is returning to the earth.
It was at that point that I really understood, I think for the first time, that I had to change, that I had to accept who Jesus was, and that I had to give my life to him. And it was only really when I did that I felt just a real sense of peace and a real sense of reaching the end of my question about why was I thinking about heaven and hell all the time. And ultimately it was because God was kind enough to give me that experience, to lead me to the place of salvation. And without that, I maybe would have never left the realm of duty and going to church out of habit, and I would never have really understood who Jesus was, and would have never come to the point of accepting him as Lord and Saviour.
So I can't tell you today that I've been delivered from drugs, I've been delivered from X, Y and Z, but the testimony of my life is that Jesus has maintained, he sustained me throughout 38 years of walking with God, which is countercultural, counterintuitive, often misunderstood, even within the church. And here we are today wanting to say to you, please, if you've never given your life to Jesus, please consider the gospel, go to the Bible, spend some time looking at the words of Jesus and consider his claims, consider the historicity of the manuscripts that we're basing our life on compared to any other manuscripts about any other historical figure in history. Please consider Jesus. But we've come to know him, and just on a personal level, he is my sanity, he is my wisdom, he is the presence that gives me comfort, he is the shepherd, he is the king, he's the brother, and there aren't words sufficient to describe who Jesus is. And I just want to testify today of his faithfulness in leading me throughout all these years.